I've worked in food service on and off since I was 16, but the job I had at the time of this story still sticks with me as the weirdest. It was one of those highway diners, small, family-owned, kind of forgotten by time, off Route 76 in Pennsylvania. It was the kind of place that looked closed even when it wasn't. The kind of place that probably hadn't changed its menu or the wallpaper since 1992. Anyway, I worked the graveyard shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which, as you can probably guess, didn't pull in many customers. Most nights were just me, the cook, an older guy named Lou who rarely spoke, and a few regulars, a trucker named Marty who always ordered black coffee and eggs over medium, and sometimes a pair of night shift nurses who'd split a milkshake and whisper loudly about their coworkers. That was the routine. Quiet. Predictable. I liked it. Then, about 3 months in, he started showing up. At first, I didn't think much of it. People came and went, especially on a stretch of road like that. He walked in around 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday night. Mid-40s maybe, balding, glasses, dressed in one of those generic brown zip-up hoodies and jeans. Nothing memorable, really. If I hadn't written this all down later, I probably wouldn't have been able to describe him at all. He sat in the booth at the very back, the one most people avoided because it was right under the vent and always a little colder. No coat. Didn't seem to mind. I walked over with a menu and asked if he wanted coffee. He didn't look up. Just said, "Yes, please," in a voice so quiet I almost missed it. I poured him a cup. He didn't touch it, just kept staring out the window beside him like he was expecting someone. After a few minutes, I came back to take his order. Still no eye contact. He mumbled something about toast and sausage. I punched it in, left the ticket for Lou, and went back to wiping down the counter. Here's the thing that stuck out to me. He never looked around. Most people glance at the menu boards or the pie display or me. They notice the jukebox, something. But he just sat there, motionless, like he wasn't fully in the room. His food came. I brought it over. He nodded, barely, and started eating. Slow, methodical, like he was chewing each bite exactly 20 times. Still didn't touch the coffee. After he left, I went to clean his booth. He hadn't finished the sausage. The toast was untouched. And when I lifted the coffee cup, the one he hadn't even sipped from, there was a business card sitting underneath it. Blank on the front. On the back, in tiny printed letters, it just said, "See you soon." I didn't mention the card to Lou. He wasn't much of a talker, and honestly, I felt dumb even bringing it up. See you soon? Maybe it was a joke. Maybe he was some lonely traveler who thought that was clever. I threw it away and moved on. The rest of that night was uneventful, but 2 nights later, he came back. Same time, almost to the minute. Around 2 a.m., I was restocking the little creamers behind the counter when I heard the door chime. I looked up and there he was, already halfway to the same booth, like he didn't need to be shown where to go, like he already knew his place. I grabbed a fresh cup of coffee and walked over. "You want the same again?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He didn't respond right away, just stared out the window again. Then, toast and sausage. No please this time, no nod. Same seat. Same slow, robotic way of speaking. I poured the coffee. He didn't touch it. Lou cooked the food. I brought it over. Same thing. He chewed like he was counting. 1 bite, 2 bites, 20 chews. The room felt colder that night. I don't know if it was the booth under the vent or something else, but I kept rubbing my arms behind the counter and glancing over. He stayed for about 30 minutes. Then he stood up and walked out, without a word. Didn't pay. Didn't say thank you. Just left. I followed him out the front door, thinking maybe he forgot. But when I got there, the parking lot was empty. No cars, no footsteps. I went back inside and checked the booth again. Another card, same spot, under the coffee cup he never drank. This one said, "You're not listening." I flipped it over. Nothing on the back. Blank. Now I was unsettled. It wasn't a prank. No one else was there. This man had walked into a barely lit diner, barely spoken to me, barely touched his food, and left me a message like I was part of something he expected me to understand. Still, I didn't tell Lou. I tossed the card in the trash, harder this time, like maybe that would make the whole thing feel less eerie. The next few nights, he didn't come in. Things felt normal again. I started telling myself he'd just been passing through. Some guy on a long drive across the state who got his wires crossed or had too much on his mind. Maybe he was medicated, maybe sleep deprived. I tried to believe anything that made it sound harmless. But on the 5th night after that second visit, I walked into my shift like normal, flipped on the lights, and went to the counter. And there, already sitting in the booth, was him. At first I froze, just stood there inside the front door with my keys still in my hand. I hadn't even locked it behind me yet. The diner was empty, dark except for the weak spill of light from the neon sign buzzing outside, and he was sitting in the booth like he had never left, like he lived there. I didn't even hear the door chime. I don't know if he slipped in while Lou was leaving after prep, or if he'd found a way in earlier and had just been waiting. I told him, "Sir, we're not open yet." He didn't answer, just kept staring forward. There was something new about his presence now. Before, he felt off, but now it felt dangerously calculated. I walked slowly behind the counter, trying to keep my breathing calm. The lights overhead flickered as they warmed up. "You can't be in here," I said again. "I need to ask you to leave." That's when he turned to face me. First time I'd seen him move like that. Smooth, steady, like a decision had finally been made. "I come when I need to," he said. Voice completely even. Just matter of fact, like he was correcting me on the hours of operation or the price of toast. I reached for the phone under the counter, the one we use for to-go orders, and calling Lou when the grill jams. "I wouldn't do that," he said. I picked it up anyway and dialed Lou's number. No answer. Then I tried the manager's emergency line. Straight to voicemail. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. Eventually he stood up and walked to the door. But before he stepped outside, he turned around and said, "You should have listened the first time." Then he left. I rushed to the window, pulled the blinds to the side. And again, there was no car, no footsteps, just darkness and a quiet, empty road. I locked the front door, deadbolt and latch, checked the back one too. Then I walked to the booth and stared down at the table. Another card, same position. This one said, "Next time I bring someone else." I took the card home with me that night. I don't know why. Maybe I thought keeping it would give me proof if I needed it. Maybe I just couldn't bring myself to throw this one out like the others. This one felt different. Next time I bring someone else. That line kept looping in my head like a warning I hadn't earned the right to understand yet. I didn't tell anyone. Not my roommate, not Lou, not even my sister, who I usually told everything. I kept thinking I could handle it, that he was just a drifter with too much time and a creepy sense of humor. But deep down, I think I knew it was more than that. This wasn't random. 2 nights later, I switched shifts with another server so I could take the night off. I told myself I needed rest, that I was overworked. But really, I just didn't want to be in that building when the clock hit 2 a.m. I stayed up late on the couch, watching true crime documentaries with the volume low. My roommate was out of town for the week, visiting her mom in New Jersey. The apartment felt too big. Every sound felt loud. Every creak felt like a footstep that stopped just before I could catch it. Around 2:15 a.m., there was a knock at the door. I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was scared stiff because I wasn't expecting anybody. I just stared at the front door from the couch, clutching the blanket like it was some kind of shield. I grabbed my phone and opened the security app. We had a cheap indoor cam that pointed toward the entryway. It didn't have a motion sensor, but it had a live feed. The feed showed nothing. Just the still frame of the hallway. Door closed, shadows steady. Then the screen glitched for a second. Just a flicker. Probably nothing. I tiptoed toward the peephole and looked out. No one. But when I opened the door, slowly, stupidly, there was something sitting at my feet. A napkin, folded, with something scribbled in pen. It said, "I like you better outside the uniform." I backed up so fast I almost fell over the shoe rack. That was the first time I truly felt like I was being hunted. I called the cops that night, told them everything. The man at the diner, the notes, the way he kept showing up with no car, no record, no explanation. They filed a report, said they'd patrol more frequently near the building and the diner. They sounded sympathetic but tired, like they'd heard versions of this story before, and most of them went nowhere. When I showed up for my next shift 3 days later, Lou was standing outside the diner, arms crossed, face pale. The front window was shattered, and there, tucked into the crack of the broken glass like a calling card, was another note, scrawled in the same tiny print. "Now you're listening." Lou didn't say much. He never did. But I could tell something had shaken him more than just the broken glass. He stood out front with his sleeves rolled up and his hands buried in his apron, staring down at that note like it was radioactive. I asked when it happened. "Sometime between 4 and 6, he said. "Security light caught movement, but the camera's too old to pick anything up clearly." There were no footprints, no vehicle spotted. Just the window, cracked from the outside. And that single note, folded clean, like it had been slipped in with care. I didn't want to go inside. I mean, technically I had to. It was my shift. But I felt like if I stepped into that booth, if I put myself in his line of sight again, I was giving him permission. Like I was playing a part I didn't audition for, but somehow ended up cast in anyway. I asked Lou if he'd stick around during my shift. He said, "Yeah, sure," and kept his promise until about 1:45 a.m. when he got a call from his son. Something about his car breaking down. Lou hesitated, looked at me like he didn't want to leave, then said he'd be back as soon as he could. So I was alone, again. And of course, around 2 a.m., he walked in. He went to the same booth. Same brown hoodie, same dead, unreadable eyes. He didn't sit this time. He stood in the center of the aisle, facing me. I stepped back behind the counter, already reaching for the phone with shaking fingers. He took a step forward. I said, "Don't." He stopped. "I've called the police," I lied. "They're coming. You need to leave." He tilted his head just slightly, as if considering that. Then, and I swear this is exactly what he said, he whispered, "No, you called them too late." And then he moved, fast, across the diner in just a few steps, around the side of the counter, reaching towards something in his jacket pocket. I didn't wait to see what it was. I ran out the back door, into the alley, straight across the lot, into the Shell station across the road. I didn't even look back until I was inside, breathless, heart pounding, pointing behind me and trying to form words. The clerk called 911 immediately. He locked the door, told me to stay behind the counter. The cops showed up fast, faster than I expected, and went into the diner. But the man was gone. Again. Just like every other time. Except this time, He left something behind, folded and placed carefully on top of the register where I always stood. Another napkin, but this one was different. Written in thick black ink, not typed or neat. "Don't make me come to your apartment again." That's when I knew for sure this guy was sick, joke or not. Something is seriously mentally wrong with him. The cops took everything that night. The napkin, my statement, even security footage from the Shell station and the diner. I told them everything, finally. From the first visit, to the cards, the notes, the night he showed up at my apartment. I told them I'd been keeping it all to myself out of fear that no one would believe me. I think they expected me to be dramatic or frantic, but I wasn't. I was just tired. So tired of carrying it around like it was all in my head. They promised they were taking it seriously now. They used phrases like pattern of escalation and credible threat to safety. The one officer, a younger guy named O'Neill, even walked me to my car and waited there until a friend of mine could come pick me up. For the next few days, I didn't go back to the diner. I stayed at my sister's place across town. I didn't sleep much. But then, on the fourth night, I got a call. They caught him. Apparently, he came back to the diner, broad daylight this time, walked in like he belonged there, like it was just another Tuesday. But Lou was ready. He called the cops the second he recognized him. They found a folded piece of paper in his hoodie pocket, blank on one side. On the other, it said, "She should have let me stay." When they arrested him, he didn't fight, didn't say a word, just let them cuff him and walked out. His name was Richard, 48 years old, no current address. Lived out of motels, some couch surfing here and there. No phone registered in his name, no car. Just years of small offenses, trespassing, loitering, once even peeping, but nothing that stuck. Until now. Because after they brought him in, they found something in his locker at the rundown storage unit he'd been renting. A notebook, full of entries, all about me. Dates, times, what I wore, what I said, notes on my body language, what I ate, when I left, even things I did at home, when I opened my blinds, when I took the trash out, when I was alone. They found 3 more napkins in that notebook, folded flat, pressed like they mattered. Each one had a date written in the corner, dates I recognized. Every one of them matched the nights he came to the diner. Every one of them had a name in the middle, my name. He was charged with felony stalking, breaking and entering, and attempted assault. Apparently, the object he reached for that night behind the counter wasn't a weapon, but a piece of frayed twine. When asked what it was for, he told them, "She was supposed to come with me." He's in prison now. No bail. Pending trial. I don't work at the diner anymore. I quit after they boarded up the window and hired a third shift security guard. I moved out of that apartment too. Changed cities. I still don't feel like I've fully exhaled. I don't think I ever will. I've waited tables for about 10 years now. I've worked in fast food, chains, dive bars, brunch spots, you name it. But this story happened back in 2017 when I was working at a little place called Mabel's Diner, about an hour outside of Tallahassee, Florida. It was one of those old highway diners stuck between nothing and more nothing. We got a lot of truckers, bikers, night shift workers from the nearest plant, and sometimes tourists who took a wrong exit and needed to regroup. Mabel's was open 24 hours, but nights were dead most of the time. The late shift was just me and Mabel herself, a 62-year-old chain smoker who'd been running the place since before I was born. She was sharp, opinionated, and had the same 4 insults on rotation depending on how much she liked you. Most nights, she sat at the counter doing crosswords and yelling the orders back to me. We had one cook back then, a guy named Theo. Quiet, tattooed, didn't talk much unless he had something to say. Solid guy, always wore gloves, and played lo-fi hip-hop through a little Bluetooth speaker in the back kitchen. This night started like all the others. It was a Tuesday. I remember that clearly because our Tuesday night regular, Walt, came in right at 10 p.m. like clockwork. Walt was a retired rail worker who ate the same damn meal every week. Bacon cheeseburger, well-done fries, root beer, and a side of coleslaw he never touched. We used to joke that the coleslaw was just a prop for him. After Walt came in, we got a trucker couple. Nice people, real polite, probably mid-40s. They sat by the window, ordered black coffee and chicken tenders, and didn't give me a bit of trouble. Around 12:30 a.m., things got quiet. Mabel lit another cigarette. She always stepped outside for it, even though the whole place still smelled like nicotine, and I started wiping down tables. That's when he walked in. He wasn't a regular. Tall, bony, kind of twitchy. He wore a sweat-stained hoodie and jeans that looked 2 sizes too big, held up with a piece of what might have been an extension cord tied like a belt. He had a greasy duffel bag slung over his shoulder and this intensity to him. He walked in, scanned the place fast, and sat at the booth closest to the kitchen. I've served enough strung out or strung along folks to know when someone's not all the way there. And this guy, he looked like he hadn't blinked since sunset. I brought him water and a menu. Before I could say anything, he looked up and said, "You got cash in the register right now?" Not even a whisper, just flat. And he said, "Don't lie." I just stood there for a second, frozen like my brain hadn't caught up to what he'd said. I wasn't sure if I'd misheard, or if he was messing with me, or, God forbid, actually serious. But when he smiled again, something in my gut flipped. It wasn't a goofy or flirty kind of smile. It was empty, more like a reflex than a feeling. "You got cash in the register?" he said again, this time slower, like he was letting it sink in. "I'm not going to ask a third time." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Sir, if you're joking, it's not funny." "I'm not." His hand slipped under the table, then came back up holding a folding knife, already open. It wasn't huge, but it was big enough to make a point. He laid it flat on the table in front of him and just stared at me. My throat went dry. I glanced toward the kitchen, but Theo couldn't see what was happening from where he was. Mabel was still outside. I had no backup, no panic button, no training for this. Then he leaned in and said something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. "I'm not here for the money. I'm just trying to see what you'll do." I took a step back. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't thinking at all. I just moved. I backed up behind the counter and reached for the register, hand shaking, trying to keep my eyes on him without making him feel cornered. That's when Theo came out of the kitchen. He saw me first, then the guy, then the knife. He didn't say anything, just froze. The guy didn't even flinch. He turned his head toward Theo and said, "Hey man, relax. We're just talking." Theo didn't relax. He had that posture, the kind guys get when they've been in fights before and are trying to decide if they're about to be in another one. His hand hovered near a stack of prep knives on the expo line. The guy smiled again, almost pleased now. "Look," he said, finally standing, "I'm not going to do anything crazy, all right? I just need a ride, some gas money, maybe a sandwich. That's all." He picked up the knife, held it low at his side, and started walking slowly toward the counter. I backed up until I hit the back wall near the drink station. Theo stepped forward just a little. Didn't say anything, didn't threaten, but he put himself between us. The guy stopped, looked at him, and said, "You don't want to get in the way." "I'm not going to hurt her unless she makes me." Theo didn't blink. "Then you better hope she doesn't." Something about the way Theo said it, flat, calm, no bluff in his voice, gave the guy pause. Then Mabel walked in. She clocked the knife immediately, didn't miss a beat. What the hell is going on in here? The guy spun around, startled, and in that split second, Theo moved. I'll never forget the sound. Not the sound of a punch or a scuffle, but the sound of the guy hitting the floor. Theo tackled him from behind, hard and fast, and before the guy could scramble back up, Mabel had already pulled the drawer off the shelf by the register and dumped it on the guy's back like a pile of bricks. She didn't even flinch. Theo kicked the knife across the floor and held the guy down with his knee while I scrambled for the phone and called 911. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. By the time the cops arrived, the guy had gone still. He didn't fight, didn't speak. Just laid there like a deflated balloon, eyes open but blank, like he was watching a ceiling no one else could see. They cuffed him, searched his bag, which, by the way, had nothing in it but a water bottle, some pill bottles with the labels scratched off, and a notebook full of scribbled words that didn't make sense, just lines and circles and the same word over and over again. Doors. They told us later he was on something. Maybe meth, maybe worse. No ID, no address. Nothing on file except for a citation from years ago for trespassing in Alabama. When they tried to ask him questions, he just kept saying he was testing the threshold. Whatever the hell that means. The night this happened, I was about 20 minutes away from locking up the diner early. We were dead slow, rain hammering the parking lot, lightning flickering through the windows every few seconds like someone was snapping pictures from outside. It was one of those deep south thunderstorms that shakes the bones of the building. No wind, just weight. Just this heaviness in the air like the sky was pressing down on us. I was the only server left on shift. Kitchen had closed 30 minutes earlier, and the other two waitresses had already gone home after their sections cleared. It was just me, wiping down tables while an old box radio hissed blues out of the corner, trying to get a head start on close. We had 2 customers left. One was a woman in her 60s sitting at the counter with a book, slowly sipping tea like she had nowhere to be. The other was a young guy in the farthest booth, hoodie on, face half hidden, hands tucked into the sleeves like he was trying to disappear inside himself. He hadn't ordered anything beyond a coffee and hadn't taken a sip since I poured it. I'd asked once if he needed anything else. He shook his head. That was an hour ago. Now it was almost 11:30 p.m. and I was ready to cash out and call it. I walked up to the older woman first and asked if she was planning to wait out the storm here. She smiled, warm and unbothered. "I'll head out after this chapter," she said, motioning to her paperback. "Almost done." "No problem." She was sweet. "No trouble." Then I went over to the guy. I kept my tone casual. "Hey, sorry, but we're closing up soon. Everything okay?" He looked up at me, and I'll never forget the look on his face. His eyes were wide, jaw clenched so tight, it looked like his teeth were grinding. "I'll leave soon," he said quickly. "I just need a few more minutes." I nodded slowly. "You waiting for someone?" "Number just waiting." He glanced toward the window, not out of curiosity, but like he was checking something. Then he pulled the hood tighter over his head and ducked his gaze. I felt my stomach twist a little. There was something off about him. Not the way he looked. He wasn't sketchy. He was clean, polite, maybe 20, 21 tops. But he had this vibration about him, like he was coiled too tight. Like if you touched him, he'd snap in half. I went back to the counter, pretending to check receipts, and kept watching him from the corner of my eye. A few minutes later, the older woman finished her tea and left. I offered to walk her to her car with an umbrella, but she waved me off. "Honey, I was walking through storms before you were born," she laughed. So now it was just me and the guy. The moment the door shut behind her, I swear the whole energy shifted. The storm cracked louder. The guy flinched. And I realized I didn't really want to be alone with him. I tried to stay calm, keep things moving. "Look," I said, stepping toward his table again. "We're officially closed now. I'm going to need to clean this area up too." He didn't move, didn't answer. just stared out the window again. So I tried again. I'm serious. It's time to go. That's when he looked up and said quietly, "He's waiting for me out there." I paused. "Who is?" The guy slowly raised his hand and pointed out the window toward the tree line at the edge of the parking lot. You couldn't see much, just black shapes and a flash of lightning every few seconds. But something about the way he pointed, not theatrical, not shaky, just certain, made my skin crawl. "I know you don't believe me," he said, still watching the glass, "but if I leave now, he'll follow me again, and next time I won't get away." I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, soaked in the dim flicker of a dying ceiling light, with the storm humming through the walls, and this kid looking at me like I was the last safe place on earth. He wasn't being dramatic. That's what really got me. He wasn't sweating or pacing or making a scene. His voice was low, steady, too calm for what he was saying. It made it worse. "You can call the cops if you want," he said, eyes back on the window. "Doesn't matter. He never comes close when there's people around." I glanced outside. Rain on the glass, pitch black parking lot, no cars, no movement, just the flash of lightning bouncing off the puddles. I didn't know what to say, so I asked the only thing that came to mind. "Who's following you?" He looked down, rubbed his hands together under the table like he was trying to warm them. "I don't know. I never got a good look. First time was 6 weeks ago, outside my apartment. I thought it was just a guy walking his dog, but he stayed. Second time was outside my job, then the bus stop, grocery store. Now he shows up everywhere. He never speaks, never moves fast, just watches." The air felt heavier. "You tell anyone?" He nodded. "My mom thinks I'm having a breakdown. Cops told me they can't help unless he actually does something." "Does he follow you inside places?" He shook his head. "Only waits, always outside, always where there's trees or alleys or dumpsters. I stopped going out at night, stopped taking the train. I've been sleeping in my car for a week." He leaned forward, finally looking me in the eye. "I only came in here because the rain started, and I thought maybe he wouldn't wait in the open." I didn't say anything, didn't have to, because that was when the power went out. No overhead lights, no buzzing radio, just black, and the sound of rain hammering the roof like it was trying to break through. I stood frozen, heart slamming against my ribs. I heard the guy inhale sharply, but he didn't move. I grabbed my phone off the counter, turned on the flashlight, and shined it toward the window. And for just a split second, I swear to God, I thought I saw a shape standing at the edge of the lot, right where the trees start. I blinked. The lightning hit. The shape was gone. Maybe it was the branches. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks. But when I looked back at the guy, his face had gone pale. He whispered, "He's closer now." My hands started shaking. "I need to call someone." "Don't," he said quickly. "Please, if you draw attention, he leaves and waits. It's better to keep him in one place. At least here, we can see the door." I didn't know what to do. I was half convinced this guy was having a full-on breakdown. Hallucinations, mental illness. Maybe he needed help, not a safe booth. But something kept me from asking him to leave. Because if he was lying, he was damn good at it. And if he was right, I didn't want to be the reason the thing outside got what it wanted. I stayed near the counter, flashlight pointed low. The guy stayed in his booth, hunched forward, eyes glued to the window. The silence between lightning cracks stretched longer. The rain started to ease. Then without warning, the bell over the diner door dinged. Just once. No one came in. No footsteps. Just that single ding. Like the door had opened a hair and stopped. I swung the flashlight toward the door. It was still shut. No movement. No sign of anyone. And yet, we both heard it. The guy stood up fast. First time all night. His chair squealed across the floor. "I need to go," he said, grabbing his hoodie and slinging it over his head. He's trying to get in. You don't have to. He cut me off. He's not here for you. He bolted out the door. Gone. I rushed forward, yanked the door open, and scanned the parking lot. No one. Just the soft hiss of rain and the low rumble of thunder moving off into the distance. The kid was already halfway down the street, running like he knew exactly where he was going. I stood there for a minute, too, the silence outside somehow worse than the storm. Then I closed the door and locked it. Double-checked the back, too. The lights came back on 10 minutes later like nothing had happened. I finished my close in silence. No music. No noise. And as I was wiping down his table, I found something tucked under the sugar caddy. A Polaroid, black and white, rain-streaked. It was the diner, from the outside, taken that same night. You could see the light from inside. Me, standing behind the counter. And in the reflection of the window, there was someone standing right behind me. I didn't sleep when I got home that night. I just laid there in bed, staring at the ceiling with the Polaroid on my nightstand, still half wrapped in a paper napkin. I must have looked at it 100 times, tried to convince myself the figure in the reflection was a trick of the light. Maybe a coat rack behind the window. Maybe a warped angle. But it wasn't. The silhouette was too clear, too human. It was tall, narrow, slightly hunched, and the worst part, the angle of the photo wasn't taken from a car or the sidewalk or even across the lot. It had been taken from the tree line. Whoever took it had been standing out there, in the dark, in the rain, watching us through the window while I poured coffee and pretended the world was safe. The next morning, I brought it to the sheriff's station. I was nervous, twitchy, probably sounded like I'd lost it. I told them about the guy, the power outage, the doorbell, the photograph. I handed it over carefully, like it was a ticking bomb and they'd know what to do with it. The deputy behind the desk squinted at it for a long time, then asked if I had a name, plate number, anything else. I didn't. All I had was the kid's face in my memory, and the way his eyes locked on that window like he already knew what was out there. They promised to file a report, took down my statement, said they'd keep an extra patrol car near the diner at night just in case. I left feeling not safer, exactly. Just heard. But that feeling didn't last. That night I got a call from the deputy. He said they enhanced the photo. There was no reflection. Nothing in the window but rain. He told me it was probably condensation, distortion from the water, and that I might have been seeing things after a stressful night. You'd be surprised how often that happens, he said. I didn't argue. Didn't even ask for the photo back. But I knew what I saw. I quit the diner 2 weeks later. Not because I was afraid exactly, but because I couldn't look at the booths without checking the windows. Couldn't walk to my car without scanning the tree line. The same storm-washed parking lot that had once felt familiar now felt like it had eyes. I never saw the kid again. Never heard anything on the news. No follow-up, no name. Just a coffee order, a hooded sweatshirt, and that look of complete conviction when he said, "He's waiting for me out there." Sometimes I think he was mentally ill. Sometimes I think he was telling the truth.